Begin the current Daf, Mesechta Nedarim Daf Yomi. We begin 4 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where the Gemara continues the discussion of the previous Daf regarding Machlokes Rav Huna and Shmuel, related to the halacha of our Mishnah when we spoke about Yesh Neder B'Teich Neder, regarding the case if someone says Hareini Nazar Hayoim, Hareini Nazar Hayoim, if that's going to be effective to be chayiv to Naziris, or only if you said Hareini Nazar Hayim and Hareini Nazar L'Machar. That the Gemara continues discussing that machlekes. Shares corresponds to today's daf. Some of the things discussed in today's daf are, like we mentioned, this machlekes Rav Huna and Shmuel of Hareini Nazar Hayim, Hareini Nazar Hayim. Then the Gemara discusses regarding the second half of our Mishnah, which we said the ein shvu b'teich shvua. Someone says shvua shleicha, I swear I'm not going to eat. I swear I'm not going to eat. The Mishnah said ein l'chayb la'achas because you're already mushba ba'omi, you only l'chayb only one. Rabbi then says, interesting, but in Nishal al-Rishayna, if you're going to be shy, you're going to ask to undo the first shvuah, Shniya Chalalav, the second oath actually will take effect. It's just there's no room for it to take effect, but it's there in Luft. It's there, and therefore it will take effect. Then on Amud Beis, we continue with the next Mishnah that elaborates on this halach of Stam Nadarim Lahachmer, that unspecific vows, we're going to go and interpret it stringently. And the Mishnah has 4 applications of this halacha. Some important terms of concepts are Matzvas B'Dava HaNader, which is that if someone goes and associates his neder with something that's a neder, that's going to be a valid neder. But matras b'dava aser, if someone associates it with something that's prohibited, but not from a vow, that will not able to make that thing into a neder. Finally, there's a Gemara at the end of Machlokes regarding the status of a kai. A kai is a creature that was not a behema or a chaya. Some say it's what's called a suffik chaya, suffik behema. It's not clear if it's a chaya behema, meaning it's one of the two, and others say it's a beri b'fnei atzmai. It's actually its own creature. It's actually neither a chaya nor a behema. So we begin the current daf, Daf Yudches, 4 lines down at the top of the Amid, like we mentioned in the previous daf. We had a machlokes Rav Huna and Shmuel regarding Hareini Nazar Hayim, Hareini Nazar Hayim. I'm a Nazar today. I'm a Nazar today. Rav Huna says in Chala Naziris on Naziris, because the first one's before the other one. The first one was already Chal before the second one. There's no room for the second Naziris to take effect. Therefore, you're not going to have 2 chiyuvim of Naziris. Shmuel says no. Naziris will be Chal Naziris, as the Gemara is going to actually bring the source today, right now from this next line of the Gemara, and ask it as a question on Rav Huna. Master Rav Nuna. Rav Nuna asks on Rav Huna from the following brisa, which brings the source for this halacha from the pasuk, which we already quoted in passing the previous stuff. It says in the pasuk, Nazir lahazir, the person is going to take a vow to make a neder of Nazir lahazir laHashem. What's this redundancy of Nazir lahazir? Mekan, from here we see, says the brisa, Naziris chal al Naziris, that one Naziris will take effect on another Naziris. And says the brisa says, I'll explain to you what I mean to say. Kashiyachal, you would think, validinu, it would be a kabal chaymer that it would not take effect. Why? Umashvu chamur, if an oath, which is very severe, as the Gemara is going to explain shortly, what makes a shvua so chamer. Yet, ein shvua chalal shvua, even though it's a very severe thing, you would think, okay, it would have more effectiveness. Still, if you already have an oath, another oath will not take effect on it. So Naziris kal, kalshkan, so Naziris, someone takes a vow of Naziris, which is not as stringent as the laws of Shuas, isn't it all the more so that if you already have Naziris, another one's not going to take effect on it? That's what says the Bryce. You need the pasuk of Nazir lahazir from the redundant terminology. It's Exeus HaKasim, Mikancha Naziris Chala al Naziris. From here we see that Naziris will take effect even though you already have Naziris before. Okay, that's the Bryce. Says the Gemara, Hey Chidami, what is the case of the Bryce of this Naziris Chal Naziris? Which, even according to Rav Huna, we had explained the previous stuff, everyone would agree. If you say I'm a Nazar today and I'm a Nazar tomorrow, then the second Nazir is going to take effect. Says the Gemara, Ha krabai? This needs a pasuk of Nazar lahazir? What do you mean? Since you're adding on another day because the second Naziris, whatever you counted up until that day was for the first Naziris, obviously, you're going to have to count another 30 days because we said there's no Naziris less than 30 days. So day 31 is a new chiyuv. You can't have just one day. So of course you can have 2 Naziris. I wouldn't need a pasuk to tell you the case of Hareini Nazar Hayim, Hareini Nazar L'Machar. Elalab, the Amar, rather, isn't it obvious that what's the Bryce to tell me? Learn it from the pasuk. Hareini Nazar Hayim, Hareini Nazar Hayim. You said I'm going to be Nazar today. I'm going to be Nazar today. Well, Katani, and what are we learning? Naziris chal al Naziris. And that's not like Rav Huna. Because Rav Huna told us in the previous stuff, no, Hareini Nazar Hayim, Hareini Nazar is not going to be effective. It's not going to work because there's no place for it to take effect. You're already a Nazar. It can't be a double Nazar. So you see, not like Rav Huna, that it's not true. It's like Shmuel that, Exeus HaKasim says it will take effect. It says, Gemara, no, it's not a difficulty on Rav Huna. What are we talking about over here in the Brisa? We're talking about where he accepted the two Naziris simultaneous. That's what the pasuk is coming to tell me. Where, okay, how could you be a double Nazir? You're not going to be. You're going to have to do one Naziris and then another Naziris. That is a Rav Huna agrees to. It's only when you're ready in Nazir, Hari Nazayim, and then you say again Hari Nazayim. That can't take effect. But when they're both at the same time, you can't say one's before the other, and then they're both going to take effect. Says the Ran, wait a second, why do you need a pasuk for that either? Obviously, it's like saying I'm a Nazir for 60 days. And that says the Ran, no, if not for the pasuk, I would have thought to say, actually, yeah, if you accept two Nazirs at the same time, you would count 60 days as one, then bring a carbon. The pasuk is coming to tell us that no, it's going to be two individual Naziros, and for each one, you're going to count 30 days, cut your hair, bring a carbon. That's what the pasuk is teaching me. Nazl has is going to be two separate Naziros, and that is a chiddush, and that even Rav Huna would agree to, unlike the case of Hareini Nazar Hayim, Hareini Nazar Hayim. Now the Gemara just concludes by saying, Umay chumma d'shvu min neder. What is the stringency that an oath has over neder that you wanted to say, a kavachaymer, that if shvu is not chal shvu, for sure Naziris is not chal al Naziris? Says the Gemara, if you think because an oath takes effect, even somebody doesn't have a substance, like we said, a shvuah is on yourself, on the gavra. So it could be on the verb, it could be on the action, it could be on sleeping, it could be on things that don't have substance. And neder doesn't have that, so Naziris, which is a type of neder, would be more kal. Says the Gemara, but wait a second, neder namechama, then I can tell you the other way too. A neder also has a stringency, sheken chal al mitzvah kedushus. It takes effect on the mitzvah. You could say kainim sukkah shani yoshiba, which only takes effect by neder, but not by shvu. You can't swear you're not going to sit in the sukkah. So then what makes shvu more chamer than Naziris? Rather, the stringency of a shvu is because it says, a pasuk in Shemais, lo yinaka. A person that takes an oath will not be cleansed if he's but when it comes to swearing, it's a very severe punishment in the Torah. That makes a chamer, and therefore you would have thought that if it's ein shvuah chal shvuah, for sure not ein naziris chal naziris. That's why you need the Torah to tell you nazir lahazer that actually you will have naziris chal al naziris. Now the Ran just says that he comes out lahalacha that just like shvuah is, because he has a whole discussion regarding a certain interpretation, but like 6 lines into the wide lines, he says that just like shvuah is nachal and shvuah to be chayiv 2 times, so too a ned is not going to be chal al a neder. Meaning, if a guy says koin malai kikazu, and then he says koin malai kikazeh, you only mechayiv only one. Because when did we say in our Mishnah yesh neder b'tech neder? That's only to count 2 naziris, like we wrote. But regarding a neder, you're not going to have a neder tech neder either. Although the wordings were neder tech neder, it's not true. You're not going to. If this chavtz is already hektish, I can't make it doubly hektish on me. But he said what Nedarim is better than shvuas is that a neder actually could take effect on a shvuah, but a shvuah cannot take effect on a neder. He says how so? Let's say someone swears that he's going to eat this loaf of bread, and then he says it's forbidden on me b'kainim in a neder. He's not going to be able to eat it. As we said, kainim sukkah shani oisa, lulav shani noitel, it's aser. And most definitely that just like you can make a neder on the dvar mitzvah, meaning mitzvahs you have to do this, and the neder is it's forbidden to me and you're not going to do it. So then the neder is going to take effect on the shvuah too, because the mitzvah and shvuah, both of them are iser gavra, meaning it's going to take effect on the iser chevtza of the chevtza of Nedarim is going to come along and be mevatel b'sheva atasa the mitzvah or the shvuah. Meaning if you swear you're going to do something, it's no less than a mitzvah you have to do it, and yet still we said that a neder will take effect. Because it's because it's in the chefza. Yeah, you swore you can do this, but the chefza is forbidden to you, so you can't do that. So neder will take effect on the shvuah. And he says also maybe that just like a neder takes effect on the shvuah to be mevatlet, so too it would be actually to be mekayim. Meaning if someone swears he's not going to eat this loaf of bread, and then he goes and makes a forbidden with a kainim, and then he eats it, he actually would be chayiv too. And so to the logic would be because if it's chal to be mevatlet the shvuah, so isn't all the more so that it will take effect to be mekayim? And he says for that reason itself, that we wrote that since shvuas is only issa gavra, so when you say kainim, you're adding on the issa chevtza. So and the Rambam's just saying a lot of very fascinating ideas when he's finalizing this sugya regarding chal al chal. So he's saying these ideas that Nedarim will take effect on a dvar mitzvah, on a shvua, whether to mekayim the shvua, to mevatel the shvua, because of the fact that it's a issa chevtza. But he says shvu will not be chal on a neder, not to mevatel the neder, not to mekayim the neder. Meaning, if let's say someone makes forbidden himself a loaf of bread, and then he goes and he swears that he's going to eat it, obviously he's not allowed to eat it. Meaning, even though he's swearing that he's going to eat it, what do you mean? You have an issa chevtza, in the object. It says also, let's say if he swears that he's not going to eat it, he's not going to be violating Bal Yachal. He says you can't say that just like the Issa Chavtza of Nadarim takes effect on the Issa Gav of Shavuos, maybe you should say the Issa Gav of Shavuos should take effect also on the Issa Chavtza of Nadarim. He says no. Why? It says because by Nadarim, it says just like there is an Issa Chavtza, there's also an Issa Gavra. Mama sounds like you're reading like some Achron over here in the run. There's also Issa Gavra. Right? It sounds like some brisket, like shtickle tire. Issa Gavra, Issa Chavtza. So it's the Ram from the Rishonim. It says also Issa Gavra. He says why? He says because since it's forbidden on him, so obviously he's also going to have Lo Yachal Devareh. And this lav is a gavra, like all lois say in the Torah. So therefore, there's no room for the shiur to take effect on the nadarim. And he brings it right from the Yerushalmi, and therefore he just makes this contrast between the nadarim being chal on shvuos, but shvuos not being chal on nadarim. Yeah, you're right. That was the Gemara's question. You're right, and that's why it's only lo yanaka. What makes it strong is only the punishment. Why does Hashem give that punishment? That's a different reason. But Hashem said lo yanaka for shvuah. One's going to get, he's not going to be cleansed. Neder doesn't have the same halacha. Therefore, actually, later on in history, they changed it. Certain times that we had a chib shvuah, they changed it to Nedarim because Nedarim is not as severe as shvuah in the punishment. So that was why we thought to say that if the shvuah is not chal on shvuah, for sure Nazir is not going to be chal on Nazir, then we have a because that no, it is chal. And again, machlek is what is a chal. According to Shmuel, Nazla Haz is even teaching you if you say Harin Nazayim, Harin Nazayim. According to Rabuna, no, Harin Nazayim is not going to be chal. It's actually only teaching you the case of Mekabel Shtei Naziris bevas achas. Now, the Mishnah, we continue with the halacha of the Mishnah from the previous Mishnah. We said, if on the safe of the Mishnah, Weber said, which is, someone swears, I swear I'm not going to eat. I swear I'm not going to eat. V'achal eats. In the chayv only chayv for one penalty of shvuah, not both of his words. However, Amar Rav says an interesting chiddush. Says initial Rishonim, he says if you go to the Rav and you get a heter that you undo the first shvuah that you took, the second oath will take effect. He says, what's my proof? The words of the Mishnah are not Eine El Achas, that it's only going to be one. Viktani, rather the wording is Eine Chayev Ala Achas. What's the difference? Not that there's not only one oath, there's two oaths. But you only be Chayev for one. Because Rav with the Lesla, there's just no room for two oaths. If you're not going to do something, it can't be doubly on that. It is or it isn't. Now, but when you ask and you go to the bezdin and they undo that shvuah, chayla, they don't take effect. That's one version of saying lishna achrina. A different version was similar, just coming from a different angle. The diik is chiyuvahu deleka. The words of the Mishnah were ein chayav alacha. So there's no chiyuv shvuah ikka, but there is an oath, and that the question is lamai hilcha. So what halacha we're learning of in the Mishnah? And that the Gemara says look at the rabbis. They're just coming from a different angle. Was a Rabbis teaching, and he says, where do I know it from the Mishnah? Or we're medayik from the Mishnah, and we say, what's that teaching us? That's teaching us like Rava, Damar Rava, the Rava said, Nishal al Rishonim, if you ask on the first oath, the second one will take the place. And says the Gemara, let's support Rava from the following brisa. The brisa says, Mishan understand Naziris. So someone takes a vow of two Naziris, and he counted the first Naziris. He went and he didn't drink wine, and he wasn't Matam Lamesim, and they didn't go to Levias. Vefish carbon, and then he separates a carbon after the 30 days. Venishal aleha, and after the end of the 30 days, when he already separated carbon, he goes to the dayan and says, "I don't want this naziris. I didn't have this in mind. I wouldn't have none done had I known." And he undoes the first naziris. So then, the second one then takes the place of the first one. Now, as the Ram points out, the one who's supporting Rav from this brisa has to hold like Rab Huna, who said that if you say Arin Nazayim, Naziris is not taking effect on the other Naziris. Why? Because if you hold like Shmuel that says that even in such a situation, Naziris would take effect on Naziris, then how would this be supporting Rava? Maybe here it's different because the moment you took the neder, it takes effect on both of them, and therefore, when you're being shoyl on the first minute, because you say Harin Nazim, it's going to take effect. So then, when you shoyl on the Rishayna, the second one's going to take the place of the first one. But by Shavuos, we're discussing Shavuos over here. And we're being a raya from Naziris. By Shavuos, if you at the moment that you swore, the second Shavuot does not take effect, because we say ain't Shavuot take Shavuot. So maybe I'm going to tell you that since it doesn't take effect right now, it's not going to take effect even when you're shayl in the first one. So what's your raya from this brisa? Obviously, it's because whoever's bringing a raya to Rav in this brisa holds like Rav Huna, and that would support him, and that's what we're saying. Most definitely, this brisa is talking about Harin Nazayim, and even so, although when you took the second neder, it's not taking effect. Because like Rav Huna who says, when you say Nadarim, it's not taking effect. Still, when you're shoyl on the first neder, it's going to take effect. That's like Rava. Because Rava is talking about Shavuos. And Shavuos, we know, it also doesn't take effect. But when you're going to be shoyl on the first one, then it's going to take effect. That's exactly how Rav Huna would be in Nazar Hayom and Nazar Hayom. Because if you say with Tumar in Nazar Hayom in Nazar Lamacher, like we had explained for Rav Huna, that would be the case of when a second Nazir is taking effect. And that's why you tell me Osle Shni B'Rishayna, because when you took the Naziris, both of them took effect, then how could you say Osle Shni B'Rishayna, but there's an extra day? How could the second one just take in place of the first one? That's what the Gemara rejects and says, that's not a raya. It can be talking about where he took upon himself both Naziris at the same time. Everyone agrees in that case that it's going to take effect. And therefore, when you're being shayl on the first one, the second one will take the place of the first one, because when you took the neder, both Naziris were appropriate to take effect. And you just had to wait. But now that you're showing the first one, okay, boom, the second one is exactly those 30 days that you had taken because you took it at the same time. But by Shavuos, I would tell you that since the second one did not take effect when you said it out of your mouth, when you can be showing the first one, it's actually also not going to take effect. So there's no raya to Rava from this halach of Naziris. Again, a little layer underneath how the Ran explained it, that it must have been going like Rav Huna. And we're saying, okay, it's like Rav Huna, that it's Hayom Hayom, and Hayom Hayom, there's no taking effect. And still you see it will retroactively take effect when you're being shown. That's exactly Shavuos. The Gemara says not true. It could be when they took it together. Bavas Achas, yeah, everyone agrees Bavas Achas is going to take effect. It just can't be right now. That's not like Shavuos, where it can't take effect, and therefore it's not a raya to Rabba that if you're going to be shown the first one, then you'll be chayv on the second Shavuot. Maybe there is no second Shavuot. Then on Beis, where we continue the halach, the next Mishnah, which we had quoted this idea many times in the past, where the Mishnah comes out and says it's stam nedarim, a unspecific vow, meaning, in other words, if someone took a neder, and you could interpret his words stringently or leniently, as long as he didn't specify one way what his intention was, we're going to go regarding his unspecific words lahachmer as a stringency. Now, however, what's interestingly is actually uperushim lahakol, but the interpretation is going to be leniently. In other words, if he subsequently goes and explains and he clarifies and he says, "Oh, this is what I had in mind," we're going to rely on those words, even though it's going to be a leniency. Ran just points out the whole Mishnah up until the next Mishnah, Ned Becherem, is all going to be explaining how we have this halach of stam lahachmer, and then the next Mishnah from Ned Becherem and onwards is going to be explaining the second half of the statement of Perush lahachmer. But our Mishnah first is going to go through the concept of stam nedarim lahachmer, as the Mishnah says ketzad. In other words, what's called stam nedarim that we're going to go lahachmer. So Amar, if let's say someone says Harei alai kabasa maliach, he says it's going to be, this is on me, let's say this loaf of bread, whatever it is, like salted meat, or kayayin nesach, like the wine of the libations. So it depends. What is he saying? Im b'shel, either shlamim or the word of shemayim nadar, if he took the vow regarding that of heaven, then us, it's going to be forbidden, because that's a davar nadar, which is a carbon, which you have the salted meat of the carbon and the wine libations of every carbon, then the sachem. Im b'shel is kachav nadar, but if he was talking about the salted meat and the wine libations of idolatry, that's a davar ha'aser, that would be mutter. Now, that's what we're saying. V'im stam, if he didn't specify, which, again, that could be of shemayim, and the salted meat is because it says, Al kol korban chatak melech, every carbon you have to bring salt. And it also sounds like of idolatry, because that's the takruvis of avodah they have. That's stam nedarim. Had he specified, shel shemayim would have been aser. Had he specified, it was avodah zarah, would be mutter. If he saw some, if he didn't specify, which sounds like either one, that's what we're saying, aser, it's going to be forbidden, because stam nedarim is lahachmer, that if you don't say which one it is, again, there is a davar hanadar, a carbon is shel shemayim, that's being matfis b'davar hanadar, that would be effective. Shel b'tzk chavim is a davar aser, to be matfis b'davar aser. You're saying this loaf of bread should be like adultery, it would not make it forbidden. Stam, we don't know, that's going to be aser. Case number 2, how do you like a cherem? If someone says this should be on me like cherem, it depends. There's more than one type of cherem. Cherem is something that's like excommunicated, but it's also like this is set apart, which is really what every carbon is, every hektish is, it's set apart. So which cherem are you talking about? There's actually two things that have the same generic terminology. Im kechem shel shemayim, if it's the cherem which you give to hektish, to shemayim, obviously aser. If you're saying this loaf of bread should be kechem of a shemayim, that's being matras b'davar nadar, that's me aser. But the im kechem shel kahanim, there's another type which actually goes to kahanim, that's mutter. That's going to be permitted because that's not considered as a davar hanadar. Now, v'mstam, if you didn't specify, that's what saying, aser, it's going to be forbidden. Here also, case number 3, harila kamaisa. Let's say it says it should be to me like maisa, like the tithe. Now, there's more than one type of tithe. In kamaisa behema another, if he went and took a vow like that of a maisa behema, aser, it's going to be forbidden because that's a davar another. Why is that a davar another? Because when you would call out the number 10, that would make it forbidden until you sacrifice its sacrificial parts. That's your wording, that's your vow, that's what makes it forbidden. But v'mshal garim, let's say it's the ma'isa of the granary, that's mutter, that's permitted because that is not something that's a neder, that's a davar ha'aser, that's the halacha of ma'isa. V'mstam, if let's say he didn't specify, aser, it's going to be forbidden. Case number 4, let's say someone says a real like a truma. It's going to be like me on the elevation. Now, there's more than one truma. If he took a vow of the Trumas Alishka, which is when the Klaisu gives a machzah shekel. And then they come and they separate 3 boxes and they take off the monies, which these are Nedarim. People are donating vows to hektish for machzah shekel. Well, then also it's going to be forbidden, that type of truma. But v'mishal garim, if it's the truma of the granary, that's going to be permitted because, again, the mais and truma by grain are davar ha'aser. Those are things that are prohibited, things, not things that are vowed. And if you matras b'davar ha'aser, that's going to be mutter. As we're saying, v'mstam, and if you didn't specify, then aser, then we're going to say stam nadarim is going to be lahachma. That's old Divrei Meir. Rabbi Shloimy, he disagrees regarding the last case. He says stam truma. This, if you said unspecific truma, it depends where you are. What does that mean? If you're Yehuda, there was a few areas in Eretz Yisrael, Judea, the Galilee, Transjordan. So if you're in the area of Yehuda, which is right around the area of Yerushalayim, the Beis Hamikdash, and you say harei alai kitruma, then it's going to be asura. Why? Because in Yehuda, since it was close to Beis Hamikdash, when you say truma, you mean the trumas alishka because that was the common terminology. That's what the language is always talking about. That's going to be stam nadarim lahachma. But the Galil, if you're saying truma, it should be like truma in the Galilee. Then actually mutar, then that thing is going to be permitted. Why? Sheinan shegalil makirnas trumas alishka. The people in the Galilee, they don't really recognize the trumas alishka since they were very far from Yerushalayim. They weren't so accustomed in this procedure of the trumas alishka. They didn't call that when they would say unspecific the word truma. They must have meant not the trumas alishka. Rather, when they take a neder of truma, there's no doubt even at all for trumas alishka. They must mean the regular truma. Regular truma is not davar nada; it's a davar aser, and therefore it's going to be permitted. Now, the Mishnah concludes with another case that stam charamim b'Yehuda. So, although we had mentioned before regarding one of the cases being chayrim, the Mishnah concludes with seemingly a different opinion. If you make stam charam, unspecific chayrim, it depends. B'Yehuda, in Yehuda, it's going to be mutarin. Why in Judea is the word chayrim going to be mutar? Because all the kahanim hang around the area of Yehuda because it's right around the Beis Hamikdash. So that's when a person would say cherem, it normally meant the cherem kahanim. So when you say cherem stam, you're going to mean kecherem gavoya, meaning the reason they would call this seifa, as we'll see in the Gemara, is Rabbi Elazar Reb Tzaddik, who, as the Gemara says, he interprets stam nadarim lahakal, and he disagrees with the halacha of the Reisha. So even though it could mean both of them, it could mean cherem gavai because it's by the base of English. It could also mean cherem kahanim. But even though it's unspecific and it could be either way, we're going to say leniently. We're going to say you didn't mean the thing that's forbidden. We're going to say you meant cherem kahanim, not cherem gavaya, and therefore it's going to be mutter. But the Galil astur, and the Galilee know it's going to be forbidden. And why? That's what the Mishnah says. Because ein anshe Galil makir is cherem kahanim. People in the Galilee don't recognize cherem kahanim, which sounds like the reason is because they don't recognize, but if they did recognize, then it would be mutter. Because again, since it can mean either one, it's going to be mutter. But since they didn't have really kahanim near them, because the kahanim all hung around the Beis Hamikdash, they weren't in the Galilee, you have all the farmers there, they weren't doing anything, so they wouldn't call cherem kahanim when they say just the word cherem unspecific. So if you're making a neder b'cherem, there's no suffix at all, for sure you meant cherem gavaya, and therefore it's going to be asa. But if there's any doubt, then we can actually say it's going to be mutter, which obviously the opposite of the other opinion that we just said before of stam nadarim lahachma. But the Gemara will explain that. No, in the Chanam, the Gemara is going to point that also. No, it's the same thing really. Stam truma and stam chayim. The Ran is going to explain they could have said either one, and it's just the tradition they had. Right, same thing. They could have disagreed in the case of truma. Rabbi Yehuda holds stam nadarim lahachma, and they hold stam nadarim lahakal, and he disagrees. He just picked a different case of chayim, but he could have spoke about the case of truma also. right? Rabbi Huda was saying that depends where you are regarding if we're going to entertain what it means, or we're going to know for sure it's going to be this or not. And you could say the same thing of Truma being different Yehuda and Galilee and Cherem. They're just picking different examples, but the machlekes is regarding, do you say Stam Nedarim lahachmer, or do you say Stam Nedarim is lahakal? Now, the Gemara asks a stira. But the Gemara asks, you told me Stam Nedarim is lahachmer. But now we have a Mishnah Masechtas Torah that says Safek Naziris is lahakal. When you have a doubt regarding Naziris, you're going to go leniently. And as the Ran says, Naziris comes through a neder. So is Stam Nedarim lahachmer, or is it lahakal? Contradiction. So I'm says likash, not difficulty. It's a machlekes. Over there in Tahiris is Rabbi Eliezer. Amish is Rabbanan. The Tanakh, we learn the Brisa that is a machlekes Tanoim, because the Brisa says like this: if someone sanctifies his wild animal or his domestic animal, meaning his chayas or his behemoths, whichever one, that category, all of those categories are going to be hekdesh. So the Tanakh says hekdesh is a koi. Included in this is the koi is going to be sanctified, which the koi was a creature that wasn't clear if it was a behemoth or a chaya. Says Tanakama, okay, so if you declare either one of these categories hekdesh, the koi is going to be included. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, lo hekdesh is a koi. You have not sanctified the koi, which was not clear if it's b'chaya behemoth. So if you makdish the behemoth, we're going to say maybe the koi is a chaya. If you makdish your category of chayas, we're going to say maybe it's behemoth. Says the Gemara, this is the machlekes of these two mishnayos. Manda Amar the Tanakama who says, your monies, you will include it in a doubt. Meaning, a kai, which is not clear if it's behemoth chaya, is going to be included if you makdish one of the two categories. That's what Tanakama says. So gufei nami. So he holds also that your body also, he holds that is also going to be ma'ayel. You're also going to bring it into a suffix. So therefore, our Mishnah says when you take a neder which is unspecific, which is a suffix, we're going to go stringently. We're going to include you in that suffix. Whereas the mandam, but according to Rabbi Eliezer, it does not include his money in the suffix, meaning the koi is not included in this being magdish. So gufe, as we continue to talk about Testament Elf, your body for sure is not including in the suffix, and therefore the mission of Masechtas Torah that says Stam Naziris Lahakal is going like Rabbi Eliezer. That's the machlekes, as we see. Do you include your suffix in the what you're saying? That we see in Mammon, for sure all the case is going to be by proof, and that's the machlekes between these two mishnayos. Thank you to any time for hosting us.